Get a little bit of Bruno in that stuff. So I'm going to read a few poems from a book manuscript that I recently completed called Holy Grail Continuation, in the spirit of this sort of medievalism interest of the night. And because it's a project directly related to Jack Spicer's book called The Holy Grail, which is pretty deeply informed by his medieval studies. Spicer's book is divided into 7 books of 7 short poems each. Mine is similarly divided into 7 books of 7 poems, although my poems are a little longer and some of my books are different. He has a book of Galahad, I have a book of Yvain, and a couple of other changes. He draws a lot on Mallory. I try to draw a lot on the romances of 12th century French poet Chrétien de Troyes. But it's deeply indebted to his project as well. So I'll read a few from this. The first poem in the manuscript from the Book of Merlin. The 2 ladies are weaving. The ladies are now weaving. The amusing ladies commit, and always do you hear them angle and pulse, kilter cranked, and to enter coat on, salt wash, to enter Merlin's demon conception into the ledger again, fooled into cognition. By angels the ladies weave, their fingers amuse the ladies, leaving, and you will not behold them, not sense them ever with eyes. Robin, to call it a birth is a little above the orange line. Sign away your resuscitation. A cup of Pittsburgh for you, a cup of slick water. Is poetry 43 million years older than Merlin's birth? Stony dragons, colored symbolic dragons, and stones above a little arrange for Igraine. Another cup of slick water, a conception at the wellhead. In the subway, it feels like a hockey rink. Merlin to thrown under, removed from the Grail narrative. A mineshaft raises expectations with Merlin, has an apparatus for moving. Josh, Gowan is always locating the rock and flints it with a forged axe in the shape of the forged Grail. The cup of the poem can be an impossible convex enclosure, meniscus of water, Toledo to Cleveland to Erie to Buffalo. Vivian put Merlin under a rock. She, Merlin, diagrammed ice flows to age over brim floats, grimmer baths. Let's see. This is from the Book of Percival. Those hot guys are angels from England, like Gregory said, from Shiny Land, and release Percival. Look at the loud of the riding, and I will go up and leave home. Odds are, spaceman, if there is a woman in the tent, my mother said to extract clean coal from the tooth decay of the locals. With Gowan chasing, or captive, what is the difference, Percival, between a cup and chemotherapy, between tetrochus hydromethyl phosphonium sulfate and an IV of vinblastine, between 4-methylcyclohexene methanol and the moat of the Grail Castle? Using Google Maps, Percival examines the places where he spent time with the hermit, where he thought he once caught a glimpse of the Grail. The valleys are filled in, and Caford Mountain is missing. Caford Mountain is a Massey Energy mountaintop removal site. Translated from the Old Welsh for the poet Lisa Robertson. Lance, and this is from the Book of Lancelot, or Guinevere rather. I get them mixed up appropriately. Lance, let's not wait for the Renaissance. Let's not, and we didn't, wait for the Renaissance. For the ellipse we mingle, Lance, the probable with the necessary, and with recourse to cardinal directions we are on the earth. Our paths were already those of the planets ellipsing. Up and down the river there is always a boat, an inland sea. Lance, you and I invented love's archive. Irregular orbit, laws of difficulty, concept as adventure. Cardinal directions loose in the world. Can you believe it? Cardinal directions. I can't even believe it. The way Galahad looks just like you. The charge of distance like gravity, which is a weak force. Strong forces are smaller. Cardinal directions are surely loose in the world. Book of the Death of Arthur. If the poem is a question of apperception, then it is a full cup, a lake, a question of fealty. The cut cord, I needed it clear and true like maybe a pine woods. We were looking for the spittle cup, and April was so warm, even the green quick fox, rampant on green field divided by green. I'll marshal all the symbolists and push them to the edge of the pier. This poem and one other that I'm going to read from the Book of the Death of Arthur take a line from Spicer. Had a poetry as magic workshop that he ran at one point, and one of the things he did in this poetry as magic workshop was there was a sort of application process on the first day. It was rigged because it was just all his friends were invited anyway. But they're sort of like Mad Lib poems with blanks that he had written that you had to fill out. And all these are in you can go see all of them if you go to the Bancroft Library in Berkeley, California, but they're also in his collected poems. They saw fit to include them as they are sort of just poems that aren't quite finished yet. So the next poem I'll read actually fills in, is just completing one of his forms. And this takes from them the line, "With the gums gone." With the causeway still under to Glastonbury, with the gums gone, the steps pour out a shale, skins stinks, the lake is a whale skin, and the cliffs are only the old dog, unsure of the water, the dog's star, also unsure of spring is too early, and it is half of the scales slip unsure that the house is also this color. Lance said all of this to Arthur. Your nephews are traitors. It's nieces you should trust. Under a gray glows preemptive, partial reincarnate of, with braids to braid shambles, down in layered fidelity, so these new cliffs shamble down to gray from eye blue of boats, trickling for a cup, a dipper shamble down to gray waters, boats of chivalry decorate to float poetry with such a gentle cold. In romance, adventure isn't endlessness. Snow, without illustration and without salt. He lost his kingdom with Gowan dreaming, the color white. He wakes over a carpet made to hang on a wall without eyes or thumbs. He suffers the splendor of splendor, but the boat boys quiver. In the shit with 3 queens of dead endlessness, how, I will not say that, to scent the time of that wound, his quondam futuresque on a rock left, snow, and again salt. I find no more written in Bocus that ben octorized, and in the ledger the shale of endlessness. There are 2 Tonys in Spicer's Holy Grail. One of them opens the book. It opens with Tony to be casual and to heal. And then there's another Tony, and he says Tony, parenthesis, a second Tony. So this poem is Tony, a third Tony. My cousin is a cop in rural Ohio. So quick I was always meeting hermits or cops on the way to Rome, but they only remember the giants and the bloodied knights. They were looking for the Grail, but that bowl was retelling them. On the green, the bees and set in the collar, a jewel begins it recursively, and the dogs and cats also lap at its lip. Before they were looking for a Grail, he was hazarding forest paths and ornamenting himself for poetry. Green the algae grows the waves, finding lodging before the tournament. Meanwhile, Arthur died from his neck. They were looking, but the big rim around Pittsburgh, Sten and Josh became friends and dearest Ian. How to relax the astronaut. The zip her, meanwhile, then went. They were looking for the Grail, but the iceberg, the real, was kept so buoyant by its curved gunnels, and Jack seemed to lose interest in seeking the Grail. Meanwhile, Arthur dissipated from his neck, and squatters and occupiers floated the inland sea. I'll end with this. Is it so pagan this tree sprouts on the side of the steps, bathe in a gray cup, holds our slow cold. The dog scents duck or laps up smelts. Everything yellow or gray or green. These colors no matter builds the physics of this haven. Echoes, lances, lance, ploshes, no oars, the point paddle. Lucky the waves are less than 4 feet. Ploshes like cold skin in silence. Clay mud cup of inland poetry. A place goes when Merlin spoke about the death. Whistle loudly for it.
Hey Dan, I have a request. Would it be possible to read your Old English translation of Portrait of the Artist as a Landscape?
Yeah, I can do that since we've got this. So I mentioned this before. This is from an early Spicer poem that's in a few sections. And the poem, Spicer's poem, borrows a theme from an Old English riddle really directly, which is in the central metaphor of an iceberg as a sailor that melts into the sea, basically. And so, seeing as he had sort of adapted this riddle and used a great deal of interesting sort of compound diction in modern English in doing it, I was curious as to whether I could reverse engineer it into Old English. And I was able to do it in pretty decent Old English prosody. There are a few liberties I take, a couple times that the lines are extrametrical. And that's, I think, more me than the poem. It's weird to write a so-called dead language that you don't speak. But I think I might try to do a few more Spicer poems into Old English at some point, and I don't know, maybe produce enough to have a chapbook of them or something. I don't know who would ever read them, but maybe some medievalists, and there's this International Society of Anglo-Saxonists, maybe they would dig it. So, Spicer writes, I watched and saw a sailor floating in that sea and melt before he drowned. Asleep and fragrant as that sleep, he seemed to draw the sun within his flesh and melt. He seemed to draw the fire from that angel and to melt. Now he is dead. To melt is not to drown, but is enough to shear the body of its flesh. The sea is meant for drowning, but when God is short of waters for his purpose, then the sea becomes a pool of fire. Angels ride astride their flamy waves, pale as desire. Terrible angel, out of that fire, out of the beach bones, melted like butter, out of the blazing waves, the hot tide, terrible angel, sea monster, terrible fish-like angel, fire breather, source of the burning ocean. Ich wicht jeseach ratliku lithan, sundnut dragen, sellich an floda, an waja melt, were dränkta, swaze on slappa, sank to grunda. Stench was sweata, slappa jelikost, thukta me that saigenga, seagullfech jethech, an sweach that leocht. Thon lie englum, tha that flasje melt, frekna me thukta. Is nu in deop dead, na drenken in brim, flashhom is hira, flash bedaled. Wyas me quellan, ac thono water therf. Drikten for his jethokta, durna runa, brimwhelm werto bella, burnenda mera, fyr an floda. Fratwed engles over lagu libusi, leochtlik ridath, blach swa melcha, bruna aled. Eala, eafull engel. Egla from tham fyra. Ut from Barnum strandes, butren molten. Ut from Edhilmes uthum, egora hatta. Ejafull engel. Eald dachun nikor. Hvala jelikost. Hasta und grim. Furblauer fami. Frum hran hralas.